Hello guys and welcome back to our episode of Alekhine versus Capablanca World Chess Championship. So game number 21 was won by Alekhine and now Alekhine is with 2 points of lead, and this is game number 22, and in this one Alekhine is with the white pieces and Capablanca is with the black pieces. So without further ado, let's get started. So Alekhine opens with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5. So we are into queen's gambit decline line. Bishop g5, knight to b2, d7, e3, bishop e7, knight f6, and castles. Rook c1, c6, bishop d3, and now capture d cross c4. So bishop cross c4 and knight d5. So first bishop cross e7, queen cross e7, and knight e4. Knight back to f6 and knight g3. Queen b4 check and queen d2. So queen cross d2 and king cross d2. So similar position, uh, rook d8 and rook h to d1, b6 and e4, and yeah, bishop b7 and e5. So knight back to e8 and king e3, king f8 and knight f5, h6 and e4, king e7 and f4, f5 and knight c3. So there is no point of doing en passant because that would have, it's a equal position. It's almost giving a +5. No, it's a completely equal position only, but opening up your king is not very good. So here just Alekhine brings the knight back, knight c3, knight c7 and knight g2 e2, g5 and h4. So Alekhine don't want to open up. g4 blocking, not opening the position, completely blocking it, and knight g3, a5 and bishop b3, rook a to c8 and a3, rook f8 and d2, bishop a8 and rook d to c2, c5 and d cross c5 and knight cross c5. So knight a4 and knight to 7 to a6. Here, if you are thinking why not capture, then yes, you can feel free to pause the video and try to find out why. So the reason why this capture doesn't work, because rook c5 check, if you Actually, this comes with check. Try to attack. Then rook c3, and you will end up a piece currently the same, but with after, for example, if b5. mm, Knight b6, and now this is also under attack, this is also under attack. So bishop b7, and you can just take yeah, rook cross b3. So that's why the knight capture is not a very good idea, because it will end up in a, it will be unprotected piece, and the check, and white has very good attack on the king, so it would be very difficult to protect this piece again. That's why maybe. So knight 7 to a6, and this is also very interesting. Bishop cross e7. So you kind of have to capture the bishop, but in the next move you kind of goes knight b6, and you trying to attack the rook and the bishop. So rook b8, and just knight cross a8. So first check, and you kind of also protect with the rook. Otherwise, if king moves, then with this check would be pretty deadly if it will come with the fork, and in also next move you are trying to attack the knight. Yeah. So rook has to come, rook cross c3, and b cross c3, and rook cross a8, and rook d1. So you have kind of given your one piece for pawns, as white has 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, sorry about, and you here black has 1 2 3 4 pawns. So let's see how the game progresses. So rook to f8, and rook to d6 check, and now king e7 and takes up this pawn, rook h6. So rook h7 check, and you kind of have to defend the knight also. So king d8 and c4. Mm, knight 7 to e6 and rook to a7. Knight to c7 and now rook cross a5. So gobbling up all the pawns. Maybe like should have tried to attack a little bit more, but yeah. So knight rook to a7, so knight to c7 and rook a5. So knight 5 to e6 and h5. So king d8 and h6. As this rook is also stuck protecting this pawn, and yeah, so knight cross f4, king cross f4, and knight e6 check. King king e3 and f4 check, and king f2, and here he takes the knights back. So this is also a very good tactic by Capablanca. And after f cross g3 check, just king g3 taking back the pawn. So now I taking the h8 pawn, rook h8, sorry h6 pawn, h6 pawn by rook at h8, and rook d5 check, king e7 and c5. So rook cross h6 and c6. And here it's kind of good that you don't take this pawn, otherwise your king will be completely open. And yeah, also that's also not very big mistake, but still just sharing. Yeah, c6, knight f8 and rook c5, king d5 and g cross king cross g4, rook g6 check and f3. You kind of have to protect the pawn, and king c7, g4 and knight e6. So rook d8 and knight d8, c5 and again knight e6, rook d5 and knight f8 this time. So king a5 and rook cross c6, e4, king e4 and rook c1. So now rook a7 check, king c6 and rook a6 check, king d7 and rook a7 check, king e6 and rook a6 check, and king e7 and a4. So now pushing the pawn, knight d7 and rook h6, rook e1 check and king d4, mm, knight cross e5. So if you have more pawns, but the opponent, if you have a piece extra against the opponent's pawns, then this is how you do it. First you isolate all the opponent's pawn and then try to go after pawn each by each. So if you have a extra piece in the end game, so a5 and knight cross g4, rook h7 check and d6, a6 and rook a1 trying to attack the pawn, a7 and knight f6. Rook b7 and mm, knight d7. So now rook b2 and just rook cross a7, taking the pawn. And now rook to d2, knight c6 and just king to c4 check. But king c6 and rook h2, rook a4 check and king c3, rook g4 and king d2, rook g3 and rook h5 and king b5. So both the players I think trying for a win, but it's a very that no, none of the player are making mistake. King e2 and king c4, rook h4 check and king c3, king f2 attacking the rook, but rook d3 and rook f4 and king d2, trying to get away from the pin. If something else, then just simply, and this would be a draw. So rook d2, king g2, king d2 and king g2 now by the white. Rook d5, king f3 and king d3, and in this position both the players agreed to a draw. So what a game. Both the players really fought very hard, and this game number 22 ended in the draw. And hope you like it. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and share this video.